Yeah, I mean, I suppose, again, it comes back to what I said earlier about, different styles could be radically disparate, and yet at the same time, because there is some similarity of thought or an empathy, where, a black metal band could be seeing some heathen themes, some of the Norwegian stuff, which, had a kind of fascination. And then you could have a very gentle sound coming out of a neo-folk band, be it coming out of Son Invictus or some Ataraxia. There is one might be pounding the drums and pushing out a really sort of deathly vocal, and the other might be singing a kind of almost medieval chant. But somehow, at some point, there is a connection in theme, in contemplations of death, or in references to myths, or just an orientation that is kind of has a aesthetic or a spiritual relationship, where you can make two things that are seemingly opposite somehow attract. So yeah, there's different ways to express the same thing, whether it's through a metal sound or through a traditional folk sound. Yeah. I suppose when I started, the neo-folk scene didn't really exist as such in name. It was associated with a number of what we call the founders of that genre of music, if you can call it that. And Death and June, Son Invictus, Current 93, sort of the triumvirate that was originally doing this, and then some relationships with some industrial artists like Boyd Rice. It was kind of in its early fruition at that stage. And then I think round about the time of the mid-90s, when we emerged, that's when people started to talk about this idea of kind of neo-folk or apocalyptic folk, and giving definition to a style of music that was on the rise, of which particularly I think Death and June was providing the foundations in terms of the aesthetics, the symbolism, the associations historically, mythologically, and so on. So we were there, pretty much at the beginning of Strength Rejoice. I've been part of it for a long time and seen it evolve. It has, like with any scene, there are elements where there's conformity and there's a certain degree of imitation, but then it sprouts a lot of originality as well, and then tends to fragment and produce different, disparate, but nonetheless innovative elements. So different styles, but it all seems to still orbit around this kind of central hub, or this kind of black sun, if you want to call it that, of what we're trying to sort of express, which is a completely new way of looking at things in terms of what music can convey. Probably doing something that's a bit more like what poets used to do, and try and trap into the sort of historical memory and the collective unconscious and that kind of stuff.